WJ, and I'm back with episode 3 of Upset Theology. I just want to thank you guys for watching and staying tuned and subscribing and sharing with your friends. It's such a pleasure to be able to come into your space and speak to you about certain things that I feel like God has given me to encourage and to influence you guys regarding life and situations. And yet again, I just want to cover the topic of why I named this Upset Theology. I've said it in season 1, but I want to bring it back up to light for any newcomers. So just imagine you have a cup or you have a bottle with the top off and it gets knocked over. What you would have to do in order to stop it from wasting, you would have to upset it, or you have to set it up. I like to use the word upset. And it's kind of like a play on words a little bit, but the fact is you are upsetting whatever that fell over. So being that I went to school for Christian apologetics, it's one important thing to me for a lot of people to have a good understanding or a full understanding of biblical truths and biblical understanding. There's a lot of times that I speak to people randomly in the street, or if I'm doing a service for them, or if we're just talking about God or Christ. A lot of people refer to God as the big man upstairs, but they don't necessarily understand exactly how or who he is to them. So it was I was inspired to start this podcast to bring the message in a particularly non-church setting, where I'm able to kind of dig into certain stories and explain some things. So on today's episode, I want to continue from the last episode, speaking about the life of Samson. And the last episode was titled No Margin for Error. It spoke about the importance of the call regarding things that you're called to do. I want to throw in a little plug where I believe that God speaks to everyone. A lot of people call the thing that speaks to them, they call it their conscience. But I do believe that God speaks to people. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because when I say there's no margin for error, I believe that there are a lot of things that people are told to do through their conscience or from hearing from God, but they sometimes put it at risk by allowing things to come in to influence them more so than what they heard from God. So from me speaking, I'm speaking to Christians, but I'm also speaking to people who may feel as though they might be feeling or might be hearing something, because I'm giving you that room to figure out where you are in life. But as a Christian, we hear from God, and in regards to hearing from God, when you hear a specific direction, there is no margin for error. That was the last episode. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper into that, please go back and watch that. But in this episode, it's titled So Much More in Store. So I'm still talking about the life of Samson. And just to give a brief overview of the life of Samson, Samson was born to obviously a mother, but the mother was visited by an angel before he was born. Now, when the angel came, she was instructed to have him live a life set apart from just a random life. I can't say a wild life or whatever, but it wasn't, his life was called to be set apart from something that was not just the usual. Some of the things that was told for him to do, which was being set apart, was to stay away from wine and fermented drinks, to not cut his hair, and to stay away from dead bodies. Now, just a quick rabbit trail a little bit. I wanted to understand why specifically were these things, why were these the types of instructions? Regarding the wine and fermented drinks, wine and fermented drinks, usually they change your ability to stay focused. It kind of intoxicates you. So in order to be set apart, he had to not get into that realm or that area where he could be intoxicated or influenced. That's why they call it under the influence of, because once you drink those things, you now become under the influence of that thing. And the interesting thing is, you can also be, now I'm talking about today's terms, you can be under the influence of social media or your friends' opinions, or just things that's going on around in your life. So when Samson was being called apart, he was instructed to stay away from wine and fermented drinks, which was the things that could influence him. So much more in store speaks of there being so much more almost behind the story. Some might not understand why he was told to do physical things regarding his call. He had been called to do something. We'll probably get into that on the next episode. But these were literal physical things for him to do that was going to protect his call, which was one, staying away from wine and fermented drinks, not cutting his hair, and staying away from dead bodies. All of these things were going to influence his call, because in a sense it would be compromising. It's like things popping in my head, because the wine speaks of the influence that outside sources can have on your internal operation. The reason why I'm even mentioning it like that is because people don't realize when somebody gets a DUI, I believe, if I'm sure I'm correct, but it's driving under the influence. Now, when you are under the influence, then your perspective or your perception, and also the things that you're trying to do is not done correctly. You're putting things in jeopardy. You're almost a danger to everything around you when you are under the influence. So I can understand why he was instructed to not drink wine and fermented drinks. When it came to cutting of his hair, one thing that I was able to find while doing some research is that if you're going to commit yourself to something, then a ritual, some people look at the word ritual in a negative way sometimes, but it speaks to your determination to stay committed to a certain thing. So in a sense, that's almost what a ritual is. You're doing something because you're committed and you're determined to say, hey, I'm going to do this thing no matter what. Regarding exercising every day, not drinking soda so you can get your sugar down. Those are certain commitments. But in the life of Samson, in order to keep his strength, which his strength came from his hair, he had to not cut his hair. And that was a commitment he made to his call. Now, I just want to speak a little bit further regarding why there's so much more in store, and what you can do to protect it, and what is in play when you are looking at these things that is in store for your life. So when I say so much more in store, I'm speaking about your future. I've been putting online lately in certain posts that your future self is depending on your current self to do what God told you to do. Your future self is depending on your current self. So for instance, if you're 30 years old, your 60-year-old self is depending on your 30-year-old self to get some things into motion. So when it comes to so much more being in store for your life, you have to understand that there's a lot of things that you may be trying to hope for, but you will never get it if you don't start now. And in regards to the life of Samson, there was so much more in store that was being put into jeopardy by him not taking the call seriously, in a sense, by allowing himself to be exposed to the wrong circumstances or conditions around him. His strength was able to be taken because he was compromised by his wife, by an outside source. And I'm gonna put the side note in there. It doesn't matter. This story itself speaks to the fact that it doesn't matter who. It doesn't matter who is in your life that is trying to influence you regarding what God told you to do. If God told you to do it, it doesn't even matter if it's your wife. If that person is asking you to compromise on the call, then you shouldn't be listening to them. So I also want to speak about how distractions can cause you to compromise your gift or your calling. Delilah was a wife that Samson chose. In a sense, you could possibly say that was the first distraction. Because if you go look into the story, which I'll put the verses on the bottom of the screen, you will understand that he was smitten in a sense, or he was like, ooh, who's that? Hey, mom, dad, can y'all go get her for me? It's literally in the book, so go read it. But he was distracted by what he saw with his eyes, tempted. So it's nothing particularly wrong with that, but you have to understand, is this going to compromise my call, or can this lead to something that is going to compromise my call? It doesn't say how many years passed from once he met her to once she started to try to get in his ear and figure out his secrets. But when you understand the true depth of your call, you should have the, in a sense, discernment. And I'm not speaking as though you're never going to make a mistake, but how important is the call that you're called to? How much more is in store? In a sense, what is at stake? I believe I had an episode in season 1 that says what's really at stake. But what's really at stake? What are you going to allow to distract you? Are you welcoming your distractions? And I want to speak about being distinct. Being called apart, well, I'll even say it like this. We all know that no human has the same fingerprint. And the interesting thing is we have, or majority of people have, or naturally, we have 10 fingers. And on each finger, there is no same fingerprint. You have 10 fingers and millions upon millions of humans. And that means your one finger is distinct and your one life is distinct. There is no human that is the same. So when you are called, you are already set apart. Even before you receive your calling, you are already set apart. You are already distinct. And I know and I believe that God has a distinct call on your life. So what are you compromising, or what are you allowing to influence you in your life that's compromising what God has called you to do? I'm just going to be open and transparent right now. I personally have been called to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning in order to either study or get some things done, because I was told that in order to get certain things done, if you're not going to do it during the day, you must wake up and do it early and do it for yourself. Do it for your future self. This is why I'm waking up at 5 in the morning. Being that I believe that I was called for a distinct purpose, and to remove all distractions, I chose to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning in order to, and let me add that it's in a sense a distraction, a sacrifice in order to do that. But it's because I believe in the call that God has on my life. I've also had to remove some people from my life, and I've also had to allow some people to leave my life. Don't chase who God allows to leave. And sometimes, if God doesn't particularly allow them to leave on their own, cognizance, you may need to have them to leave. Why? Because there's so much more in store. One other key statement that I wanted to state, which is this is almost where this whole thing was built from, the thought process. I wanted to title this "Buy into Yourself." BUI into yourself. Oftentimes we, as people, you have the mindset to say, oh, I have this new business idea and I want somebody to invest in my business. That means you want somebody to buy into your idea, the thing that you believe is worth something. So you want to invite people, hey, invest in me, invest in my idea. But guess what? I want to influence you to buy into yourself. If you buy into yourself, you'll do whatever it takes. You'll wake up at 5 a.m. You'll go to bed late at night. You will do exactly what it takes in order for you to accomplish the thing that God has called you to do. I want to encourage you that it is worth it. 20 years, 10 years, 5 years later, you will thank your past self for being able to recognize that there is so much more in store. It is important, it is pivotal. And when I even say pivotal, if you're going in the wrong direction, you must pivot in order to go into the right direction. So it is pivotal for you to recognize what am I doing? Where am I going? Who's influencing my life? What's at stake? Am I distinct? I can answer that for you. You are. And what is it going to take in order for me to accomplish what God is calling me to do? What type of sacrifice am I going to have to make in order for me to reach what God is calling me to do? I honestly don't believe that there is going to be anything in your life where you won't have to make a sacrifice in order to accomplish it. Why? Because there's things that in order for you to accomplish, you must kind of like build that determination up. There's a verse, let me see if I can find it here. It's James. This is one of my favorite verses, but I wanted to read it. James chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. It says, "Count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness." And every time I read that verse, I think about when you go to the gym and you're building your muscles. That means that life situations are going to challenge you in a way that is not going to kill you. Weights at a gym doesn't kill you, but it just comes to make you stronger. It comes so that you can be steadfast and unmovable. Like I work out well, let me rephrase that because I don't really work out nowadays. But I have a job where I'm actually working out all day long. And there's people that are bigger and more muscle bound than me. And they can't do the things that I do because I've already exercised these muscles where I'm able to do a certain thing. And even though they're bigger, they don't have the steadfastness that I have. They don't have the stamina and the determination at the same point that I have. But all of these things are going to matter when it comes to you recognizing that there's so much more in store for your life. Don't let the outside influence and people tell you what you should be doing with your call. I want you to sit back and observe your life, observe the call, and see, are you on the right path? Are you committed to yourself? Are you committed to yourself? You want people to be committed to you, but are you committed to yourself regarding the call that God has in store, that He has on your life? There's so much more in store, I promise you. So we're going to close on these 3 Bible verses that I feel that basically going to solidify everything that I've been saying. And then stay tuned for the next episode because I still want to dig more into the life of Samson. But I told you guys I wanted to build you up. So this is your encouragement for this week. I want you to also either write these down, put them in your phone, memorize them, however. But this is why there's so much more in store. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58, it says, "Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. So that means the calling that he has in store for you, you might start working in it or working on it, and you might not see the results. You might be in a situation where you don't always have all the money. It's like, I'm doing what you told me to do, God, but I don't see the results yet. Trust me, your labor will not be in vain. James chapter 1, verse 12, it says, "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." And then lastly, let us hold fast. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23. "Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful." Now, that last line says, "For he who promised is faithful." That's the thing where they say you could take that to the bank and cash it. God is the one that wrote them checks. You don't have to worry about if it's going to come to pass. That's the promise. For he who promised, he is faithful. He is faithful and just to perform it in your life. The things that you're desiring for, I almost want to pray and encourage you to not get distracted by your personal desire to get certain physical things. I want to encourage you to reestablish your desire for it to become God's desire, not just your desire, because God's desire is going to become, it can become your desire, but it will also become more fulfilling than the thing that you think you want. The thing that you think you want, God's desire for your life can be more fulfilling than that thing. So for example, and I'm gonna leave it alone, the car. I can imagine that people who might have wanted that brand new 1992 BMW 7 Series now look at that 1992 BMW 7 Series and say, it ain't even worth nothing right now. That thing that you think you want, in many years, it's not even going to be worth anything. But the thing that God wants for your life, that's going to give you that internal happiness, that everlasting happiness, that's the thing that I want to encourage you to desire or to get an understanding of, because God has much more in store for you. So I thank you guys for joining me today. I pray that this message is well received. I pray that this is an encouragement to you. Mainly the point of not being weary, as the Bible says, in well doing. Because when you're doing well, it may not look like you're doing anything. But don't be weary, because there's a promise that is attached to it where it says, "For he who promised is faithful and just to perform it." God is good, and I am so happy that you guys are watching. If you made it to the end, I'm proud of you, because with this word, this is not my word. With this word, you are going to be able to do some great and mighty things. So I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.